Have you ever wondered why some relationships, despite their promise, leave you feeling drained and confused? It's like stepping into a room where the light flickers, shadows twist unnervingly around every corner. The person you thought was a partner, their voice, their touch, suddenly seems to carry a weight that presses down on your very sense of self. You question your reality, your worth, the very truth of your emotions. This silent dance of doubt and disorientation isn't an accident. It's a pattern written deep into the psyche, a hidden choreography of emotional manipulation rooted in ancient, archetypal forces. Imagine a throne room, bathed in cold, distant light. Here sits the sovereign queen, not the figure of fairy tales, but the fierce essence of the feminine self, radiant yet burdened by expectations. She governs the inner realm of self-worth, justice, and personal sovereignty. Yet in many relationships, her throne feels shaky. The invisible hands of ego projection and shadow dynamics claw at her reign. The manipulator's voice is a subtle echo, distorting the landscape of the queen's kingdom until she doubts her own sovereignty. This dynamic begins long before any words are spoken. It is planted in the soil of childhood wounds, in the fertile darkness of unmet needs and fractured attachments. The Jungian concept of projection is key here. The manipulator projects their own unresolved shadows onto the queen, coloring her with accusations she never deserved. In turn, the queen unconsciously internalizes this false image, losing sight of her authentic power. She becomes a battleground where control and victimhood wage a silent war. The manipulator's greatest weapon is not overt violence or grand gestures, but the slow erosion of trust in one's own perception. Gaslighting, a term now common but still so insidious, is the practice of distorting your reality until you stand on shaky ground, questioning what is true. This is no mere quibble over facts. It is an assault on the very foundation of self-worth. The queen feels her crown slipping, as if the ground beneath her is no longer hers to command. She hears the whispers, "Are you too sensitive? Did you misunderstand? You're overreacting." In these moments, the queen's armor is tested. The armor is not forged of brute strength but of emotional intelligence, the keen awareness of her feelings and the courage to hold boundaries firm. Boundaries are the kingdom's walls, protecting the sovereign's realm from invasion. Yet, when the queen doubts her own right to build walls, she leaves the gates wide open, vulnerable to repeated assault. Now, envision the manipulator not as a villain in a story, but as a shadow figure within the psyche, the aspect that clings to control out of fear, the part that sees vulnerability as weakness. This shadow thrives on confusion, on the queen's hesitation to claim her truth. The manipulative dance is a reflection of the inner conflict within every soul, the tension between the light of authenticity and the dark pull of unresolved pain. The path forward demands a fierce kind of discernment, a seeing beyond the surface performance into the emotional currents beneath. This is where Stoic philosophy offers a silent wisdom. Focus on what can be controlled, your perception, your response, your boundaries, and let the rest fall away. The manipulator's attempts to rewrite reality lose their power when the queen stands firm, anchored in her own knowing. You might ask, how can this firm knowing emerge when the heart is tender and the wound still raw? The answer lies in cultivating emotional energy protection. It is the gentle, unyielding act of saying no to what drains you, and yes to what nourishes your spirit. It is the slow reclaiming of voice in the face of distortion, the subtle art of refusing to absorb the shadow cast by others. Consider the attachment wounds that whisper beneath the surface: anxious longing, fearful withdrawal, the hunger for approval. These ancient patterns often draw the queen toward the very relationships that test her sovereignty. She might recognize the pull toward a partner who dismisses her feelings or manipulates her perception, because deep down, It echoes an old story of abandonment or neglect. Understanding these patterns is not a judgment, but a key to breaking free. And so the queen begins her true reign, not by forcing change in others, but by transforming her own inner kingdom. She nurtures the parts of herself that have been silenced. She listens to the quiet voice of her authentic self, and she learns to spot the smoke signals of manipulation before the fire takes hold. Ask yourself, when have you felt your reality questioned or your feelings dismissed? Where in your life have the subtle threads of control woven themselves so tightly that you lost sight of your own boundaries? The question is not just to identify, but to feel deeply the sting of that loss, and then to awaken the power to say, enough. Beck. Oz, the sovereign queen, is not a victim of circumstance. She is a living symbol of inner sovereignty, of a feminine power that refuses to be diminished. She is the guardian of your worth, the fierce protector of your truth. In the quiet moments when doubt creeps in, remember, the power to discern, to set boundaries, to protect your emotional energy lies within you. It is the slow reclaiming of a throne that was always yours. What would it feel like to step fully into that throne? To wear your worth like a crown, unshaken by the storms of manipulation? To know, without question, that your truth is valid, your feelings worthy, your boundaries sacred? The journey is not simple. It is woven with shadows and light, pain and healing, confusion and clarity. But every step toward awareness is a step away from the silent erosion of self. The sovereign queen rises in those moments of choice, when you decide that no one else's distortion can rewrite your story. There is a quiet battle raging beneath the surface of many relationships, one that most never speak aloud. It is the tug-of-war between the inner sovereign queen and the shadow forces that seek to fracture her foundation. These shadows wear many masks, the charm of control disguised as care, the twisting of truth masked as concern, the silent withdrawal cloaked as disappointment. Each tactic is a thread in a web designed to ensnare the queen's sense of self, pulling her deeper into doubt and disorientation. This struggle often begins with subtle shifts in communication, an offhand comment, a lingering question that unsettles your certainty. The manipulator's voice can be soft yet insistent, like a tide slowly eroding the shore. What starts as a question, "Are you sure that's how it happened?" soon becomes a relentless storm of second-guessing. The queen, once confident in her own perceptions, begins to waver. The ground feels unsteady. Who is really telling the truth? Where is the boundary between reality and manipulation? These experiences aren't random. They are reflections of the Jungian shadow at work, both within yourself and in others. The shadow holds the parts we deny, reject, or fail to integrate: anger, fear, vulnerability, and yes, the desire to control. When these aspects remain unconscious, they find expression in unhealthy dynamics. The manipulator acts from their shadow, projecting insecurities and pain onto the queen. The queen's own shadow, if unrecognized, can respond with confusion, codependency, or a desperate need for approval. Recognizing this interplay is the first step toward liberation. It's like stepping back from a kaleidoscope of confusion to see the pattern beneath. This requires cultivating a strong inner witness, an aspect of consciousness that observes without judgment, that holds the tension between light and shadow without becoming overwhelmed. The Stoics called this the inner citadel, a calm fortress within where reason and clarity reign, even amid chaos. Your emotional energy is the currency in this battle. Every time you doubt yourself, every moment you accept distortion as truth, you spend that currency unwisely. The sovereign queen must learn to steward her emotional resources carefully, discerning when to engage and when to withdraw. Setting boundaries becomes a sacred act, not a rejection of others, but a declaration of self-respect. Boundaries can take many forms: the quiet refusal to engage in manipulative conversations, the clear articulation of what is acceptable, the courage to leave situations that drain rather than nourish. They are the walls of the Queen's realm, not barriers of isolation but shields of protection. Each boundary set strengthens the Queen's sovereignty, teaching both herself and others that her worth is non-negotiable. There is power in naming the unseen forces at play: gaslighting, emotional coercion, projection. These words are more than labels. They are maps guiding the Queen out of confusion toward clarity. When the fog of manipulation lifts, the path to authentic connection becomes visible. Authenticity requires courage. The courage to face uncomfortable truths, to speak when silence feels safer, to claim your emotions as valid and important. Attachment patterns add layers to this complex dance. The anxious heart yearns for connection, sometimes tolerating manipulation to avoid loneliness. The avoidant heart pulls away, erecting walls that can be mistaken for strength. Both patterns, rooted in early relational wounds, shape how the Queen approaches intimacy. Awareness of these tendencies is a gift. It illuminates why certain relationships feel like a trap rather than a refuge. Imagine the Queen walking through her inner palace, encountering these attachment patterns not as enemies, but as parts of herself needing compassion and understanding. Healing begins with integration, not rejection. The shadows soften when met with light. Emotional intelligence blossoms when self-awareness deepens. I'd ask yourself now, where do these shadows show up in your life? When have you felt compelled to choose between your own truth and the demands of another? How often have you silenced your feelings to maintain peace, only to find the silence heavy and suffocating? The Sovereign Queen's journey is not about perfection but about presence. It is the unfolding of a self that can hold contradictions, that can acknowledge pain without losing hope, that can assert boundaries without fear of abandonment. This presence invites authentic relationships, relationships where power is balanced, where vulnerability is met with respect, where emotional manipulation has no place. Within this journey lies the transformative power of individuation, the Jungian process of becoming whole. Individuation calls the Queen to embrace all facets of herself, to claim both shadow and light as integral parts of her being. This path leads away from dependency on external validation and toward the radiant center of self-acceptance. Stoicism reinforces this path by teaching that peace comes not from changing others, but from mastering one's own responses. The Queen learns to cultivate inner calm amid outer chaos, to focus her energy on what is within her control, her thoughts, her choices, her boundaries. This mastery is not cold detachment but a warm strength rooted in self-respect. The liberation found here is profound. The freedom to choose relationships that honor and uplift, the freedom to walk away from those that diminish, the freedom to live authentically without fear of losing approval. Now, in this unfolding clarity, ask yourself, what does your sovereignty look like? How would your relationships change if you embraced your full power to discern, protect, and connect authentically? Where might you begin to set new boundaries, even if they feel daunting? The Sovereign Queen rises not in moments of ease, but in the courageous acts of claiming her truth and refusing to be diminished. She is the living testament that worth is not granted by others. It is born within and fiercely guarded. There is a moment in every woman's journey where the illusion of not being enough begins to crack. It's subtle at first, an uneasy feeling in the pit of the stomach, a whisper of doubt when words fall like shadows. This feeling is not a flaw within you, but a reflection of deep psychological currents shaped by unseen forces. The root of this struggle is often entwined with the Jungian concept of the ego's fragile sense of self. constructed through countless interactions with others, and shaped by collective and personal shadows. The ego, that part of the psyche responsible for identity and conscious awareness, is both a fortress and a mask. It strives for approval, safety, and belonging. But when the ego is tethered to external validation, especially from those who wield emotional power in subtle or overt ways, it becomes vulnerable to manipulation. The sovereign queen's crown feels heavy when the ego relies too much on the approval of others, particularly in intimate relationships. At the core of this lies a dance between the feminine and masculine unconscious. In Jungian terms, the anima and animus, archetypal energies within us, can become distorted, driving attraction toward unhealthy patterns. For example, a woman may unconsciously seek a partner who embodies the shadow animus, controlling, dismissive, emotionally unavailable. This pattern is not about punishment but repetition, a psyche's way of trying to resolve past wounds through present experience. This dynamic feeds the cycle of feeling not enough. The manipulative partner's constant withholding or criticism triggers the queen's deepest insecurities, reigniting old fears of abandonment or inadequacy. The shadow animus whispers, "You must change to be loved." But transformation born from manipulation is never authentic. It fractures rather than heals. True healing begins when the queen recognizes these unconscious pulls and chooses to break the cycle. This requires fierce honesty, a willingness to face the parts of herself that seek approval in unhealthy ways, and to nurture the emergent self that stands independent and whole. It is an act of reclaiming the throne from the tangled roots of old wounds. In this process, emotional intelligence is a beacon. It is not merely understanding emotions, but sensing the subtle shifts in energy and intention beneath interactions. Emotional intelligence teaches the queen to detect the first flicker of manipulation, to recognize gaslighting before it takes hold, and to discern between genuine connection and shadow projection. Boundaries, then, are not walls of separation, but gates of discernment. They allow the queen to decide who may enter her realm and on what terms. Setting boundaries in the face of emotional manipulation is an act of sovereignty, a declaration that self-worth is inviolable. This act is deeply rooted in trauma-informed psychology, which reveals how early attachment wounds shape responses to manipulation. Women who grew up in environments where love was conditional or inconsistent often carry a hypervigilant nervous system, always alert for signs of rejection. This hypervigilance can make boundary setting feel risky, as if safety depends on constant accommodation. But the sovereign queen learns to hold space for her own safety first, understanding that true connection cannot grow in a garden of fear. She learns that saying no is not rejection but protection, both of herself and of the possibility for authentic relationships. The Stoic wisdom woven through this journey offers a steady anchor. It reminds the queen that while she cannot control others' behavior, she always controls her response. This control is not about suppression but about mastery, choosing to respond with clarity, calm, and self-respect rather than reactivity or surrender. Consider this. In moments when manipulation attempts to rewrite your reality, what if you paused, took a breath, and asked yourself, what part of this is within my power to change? This question shifts the focus inward, away from chaos, toward a calm center. It allows the queen to engage her inner citadel, that fortress of reason and emotional resilience. This practice is transformative. It reclaims energy lost to confusion and fear and redirects it toward healing and growth. The queen, once fractured by doubt, becomes whole through the integration of shadow and light, trauma and strength. Now, reflect on this. Where in your relationships have you sacrificed your truth to maintain peace? When have you silenced your inner voice to avoid conflict, only to feel diminished? What small, brave step could you take today to reclaim your boundaries and honor your worth? The sovereign queen's power is born not in grand gestures, but in these daily acts of courage. Each boundary set, each truth spoken, each moment of self-compassion is a brick laid in the fortress of authentic self-worth. Remember, this is not a journey to be rushed or forced. It is a weaving of threads, shadow and light, strength and vulnerability, into a tapestry of wholeness. The Queen's crown is not weighed down by perfection, but lifted by the authenticity of her sovereignty. What would it mean to you to fully embrace this sovereignty? To live not by the shifting approval of others, but by the steady light of your own truth? How would your relationships transform if you approached them from this place of empowered clarity? The path is yours to claim. The throne waits. The sovereign queen stands at a crossroads, a threshold between the worn paths of old wounds and the uncharted terrain of authentic selfhood. Here, the shadows that once held sway begin to lose their grip, not through force, but through recognition and integration. This moment is a quiet revolution, a turning inward that ripples outward, transforming every connection and every narrative that once told you, you are not enough. In many relationships, there exists a subtle, unseen exchange of power, a psychic economy where emotional energy is spent, borrowed, or stolen. The manipulator seeks to control this currency, to divert it from the queen's treasury into their own shadowed coffers. It is a slow bleed, a siphoning of confidence and clarity, leaving the queen depleted and uncertain. Yet, within this depletion lies the seed of awakening. The awakening begins with the conscious weaver, the archetype that understands the art of connection not as domination but as co-creation. The weaver sees the patterns, the tangled threads of interaction, and gently untangles what no longer serves. She knows that true power flows from aligned boundaries, from emotional honesty, from the courage to face discomfort rather than avoid it. To embody this archetype is to weave a new narrative, one where emotional manipulation no longer defines the terms of engagement. This narrative embraces complexity, acknowledging that the manipulator is also a figure shaped by their own shadows and wounds. Compassion arises, not as weakness, but as fierce understanding that frees the queen from the need to fix or control another. The path forward involves a radical reclaiming of emotional space. The queen learns to protect her energy as a sacred resource. This means discerning not only what she allows into her life, but also how she responds internally. She practices the art of emotional boundary setting with kindness and firmness, recognizing that saying no is often the most profound expression of self-love. At the core of this practice is the recognition of gaslighting's corrosive power. The weaver teaches that when one's reality is consistently questioned or dismissed, it fractures trust in self-perception. Rebuilding this trust is an act of resilience, a daily reaffirmation that your feelings are valid, your memories are real, and your truth is undeniable. This reclamation also draws deeply from Stoic wisdom. The Queen's Sea cultivates the strength to endure external chaos with internal calm. She knows that while she cannot command others' actions, she can govern her mind and heart. This mastery is not stoic detachment, but an active engagement with life's challenges, met with grounded clarity and emotional presence. The integration of these philosophies creates a powerful synergy. Jung's call to individuation, the becoming of one's whole self, finds new expression in the practical tools of trauma psychology and the timeless resilience of Stoicism. Together, they form the Queen's armor, not of steel, but of awareness, compassion, and steadfast boundaries. Now, the question turns inward. Where in your life do the threads of manipulation still weave their way into your heart? Which emotional energies are you willing to protect fiercely, and which old patterns are you ready to release? How might you begin to weave a new story, one where your worth is the foundation, not the casualty? This process is not linear. It may feel like stepping through shadows only to find light, then darkness again. Yet each cycle deepens the queen's sovereignty. Each moment of choosing self-respect over self-doubt strengthens her reign. Consider the subtle power of reclaiming your narrative. When you name the manipulation, when you articulate your boundaries, when you affirm your truth, you reclaim authority over your emotional realm. This act sends ripples through your relationships, signaling that the era of invisibility and self-doubt has ended. The sovereign queen knows that true peace is not granted by others, but earned through the mastery of self. It is the calm center in the storm, the unshakable knowing that no external force can diminish her worth unless she allows it. Take a breath now. Feel the pulse of your own power beneath the layers of doubt and confusion. This power is ancient, archetypal, and deeply feminine. It is the light that guides the queen back to her throne every time she is pushed away. As the journey continues, remember, you are not alone. The threads of shared human experience weave us together, a tapestry of struggle and triumph. The sovereign queen rises not in isolation, but in the company of countless women who choose, again and again, to say, enough. What will your next act of sovereignty be? How will you honor your worth today and every day? Where will you place your boundaries? And how will you protect your emotional energy moving forward? This moment is yours. The throne awaits your return. The sovereign queen's journey toward reclaiming her power is rarely straightforward. It winds through tangled forests of doubt and over jagged cliffs of fear. Along this path, the shadows whisper old stories, the narrative that you're too much or not enough, that love requires sacrifice or peace means silence. These are not truths but echoes from a past that sought survival over flourishing. Recognizing these echoes is a pivotal step, as it allows the queen to distinguish her authentic voice from the imposed scripts of manipulation. Emotional manipulation often disguises itself in familiar patterns. It appears as insistence cloaked in concern, as subtle dismissal framed as advice, as the gentle erosion of boundaries masked by affection. This manipulation works by sowing seeds of self-doubt, quietly undermining the queen's trust in her own feelings and perceptions. Over time, this erosion chips away at her sovereignty, leaving behind a hollow space where self-worth once thrived. Here lies the crux. The battle is not with the other, but within the self. The Jungian ego is vulnerable when it has not integrated its shadow, the rejected, suppressed parts of the psyche. These disowned pieces, anger, vulnerability, neediness, manifest externally through relationships as triggers or projections. The queen may find herself reacting with confusion or guilt, caught in cycles of appeasement or rebellion, all fueled by the unconscious dance between ego and shadow. Healing, then, requires embracing these shadow elements with compassion and courage. To face the parts of oneself that feel not enough is to begin the journey of individuation, the alchemical process of becoming whole. This is the sovereign queen stepping into her fullness, reclaiming every fragment of her being without shame or denial. In this space of wholeness, boundaries take on new meaning. They become not walls of separation but living expressions of self-respect and clarity. Saying no is not an act of rejection, but an affirmation of one's inner truth. Each boundary set is a stitch in the tapestry of emotional safety, weaving together strength and tenderness. The queen learns to protect her emotional energy like a sacred flame. This flame illuminates her path and warms her spirit, but requires careful tending. She becomes discerning about where and with whom she shares her light. Emotional energy protection is not about shutting down, but about choosing the quality of Jungian that nourishes rather than depletes. This discernment grows from emotional intelligence, a deep sensitivity to the subtle currents beneath words and actions. The queen senses when empathy is genuine or weaponized, when concern is sincere or controlling. This intuitive awareness is the queen's compass, guiding her through the labyrinth of relational dynamics. Stoic philosophy offers a sturdy scaffold in this process. It teaches that while external events may be unpredictable and beyond control, the queen's responses are always within her power. This insight cultivates resilience, a calm strength that remains unshaken by manipulation storms. She learns to respond with measured clarity, choosing peace over chaos, clarity over confusion. In moments of doubt, the queen recalls that true worth is intrinsic, not contingent on external validation. She recognizes the ancient dance of anima and animus within her psyche and in others, acknowledging that attraction to unhealthy patterns often reflects unmet inner needs, not personal failure. This understanding dissolves shame and opens the door to self-compassion. Ask yourself, when have you allowed old wounds to dictate your boundaries? Where might you be complicit in perpetuating cycles that diminish your worth? What would it mean to claim your truth unapologetically, to step fully into your sovereignty? The sovereign queen's power lies in these questions and the choices they inspire. Each conscious decision to honor oneself chips away at the shadows that once held sway. This process is a fierce act of love, not only for oneself, but for all relationships touched by this transformation. The journey towards self-worth and authentic connection is ongoing. It requires patience, courage, and relentless commitment to truth. Yet every step taken in awareness expands the queen's realm, building a kingdom where manipulation cannot thrive. So, where will your next step lead you? How will you continue to nurture your emotional intelligence, fortify your boundaries, and cultivate the inner calm that is your birthright? The sovereign queen knows the throne is never lost, only sometimes forgotten. It is time to return and claim it once again. The sovereign queen's reclamation of self-worth is not merely a personal victory. It is a revolution in the landscape of her relationships. When she steps fully into her power, the dynamics around her begin to shift. The subtle games of control lose their footing because she no longer participates in the dance of manipulation. Her presence is a clear signal. Her boundaries are sacred, her truth is unwavering, and her worth is inviolable. This transformation is felt deeply in the psyche. The queen's ego, once fragile and reactive, becomes a grounded center of conscious awareness. She recognizes the archetypal roles played out in her relationships, the manipulator as the shadow animus seeking control, the victim as the ego tethered to external validation, and refuses to be trapped by these old dramas. Instead, she chooses a new narrative, one of mutual respect and authentic connection. The process is not without struggle. Old wounds will flare, shadows will attempt to reclaim their hold. But the queen meets these challenges with resilience born from emotional intelligence and stoic calm. She understands that her peace is not the absence of conflict, but the mastery of response, the ability to remain centered amid chaos, to hold firm to her boundaries even when tested. In practicing this mastery, she cultivates a powerful inner dialogue. Instead of succumbing to the whisper of not enough, she affirms her intrinsic value. She listens deeply to her emotions, discerning when they signal authentic need versus reactive fear. This nuanced awareness enables her to act with clarity rather than impulse, protecting her emotional energy without closing off her heart. The Sovereign Queen also recognizes the importance of community and support. Individuation does not mean isolation. It means choosing connections that nurture and empower. She surrounds herself with those who honor her boundaries and reflect her worth, understanding that true intimacy requires mutual respect and emotional safety. Trauma-informed psychology teaches that healing is relational. The Queen's journey toward wholeness is supported by relationships that witness her truth without judgment, that hold space for her growth without control. These relationships become the fertile ground where her sovereignty blossoms fully. In moments of doubt, the Queen recalls the Stoic principle that external circumstances do not define her. She embraces the serenity to accept what cannot be changed, the courage to change what is within her power, and the wisdom to know the difference. This triad guides her through the complexities of emotional manipulation and relationship dynamics with grace. Now, invite yourself to reflect. How might your relationships transform if you embodied the Sovereign Queen's calm strength and clear boundaries? What patterns are you ready to release, and what truths are you prepared to claim? How can you cultivate emotional intelligence that protects your energy and fosters authentic connection? The path of self-worth is a sacred pilgrimage, sometimes winding, sometimes steep, always deeply rewarding. Each step taken with awareness is a reclaiming of power, a weaving of light into the tapestry of your life. Share the moment you finally said enough and reclaimed your power in the comments below. Your story is part of this collective awakening. Remember, the woman who sees the truth chooses her peace.